Well, it's nice to meet with you, Cheryl
Thank you.
McGinnis. Thank you
nice
so
to meet
much.
you.
So tell me a little bit about your background in art curating and your experience.
So I became an art dealer around 1995 after I had finished school, and at first I thought I wanted to go into restoration. I had studied at the University of Rome, so I was studying a lot of Renaissance art and such. But something brought me back to New York, and part of it was that there's so much contemporary art that elicits such a response from me, a lot of it negative. And my one professor thought that it was, she kept saying it's good to have a negative response. It's not wrong, or it's not necessarily negative. It's a powerful response. And so I came back to New York and wanted to be a part of the contemporary art world. And the art that I found exceedingly interesting at that time was from artists who had left China between 1982 and 1986, and were just starting to show here in New York, but no one else was looking at their work. So artists like Zhang Hengtu and Ai Weiwei, Zhang Quan, I found them exceedingly interesting. This notion of this cross-cultural exchange coming out of Mao's China, being under that kind of regime, and then finding yourself in New York, not even America necessarily, but New York, and what that does. And so I started to show those artists, and I started to show them out of my own apartment. And one of the kind of, at that time, salons were popping up. And it was one of the first newer ideas of what a salon is in New York City, because the younger dealers couldn't afford gallery space. And at this point, Soho was still the center of the art world in New York. It wasn't, people were just starting to think about going to Chelsea. And I decided that I really wanted to do something different. I didn't necessarily want a gallery space. And interestingly enough, these artists didn't necessarily want it to be in a traditional gallery. In fact, artists like Ai Weiwei and Zhang Hengtu, they kind of had this manifesto that they all signed, that they would continue to do their work and support each other and not necessarily get into the gallery system, but to just do the work that they were doing. So it kind of fit that they came to my salon, and the salon was about not just showing work, but people talking about the work, most specifically the artists talking about their experience. Because art sales are such that, first of all, not everybody can afford it. But I didn't want people, of course you need to sell to make a living, and the artists need to sell, but I also wanted people in the space that it wasn't just about buying or acquiring art, but it was the dialogue by which art, that we could create a greater dialogue about culture and art. Because certainly learning history and such, there's the history that you read in the books, and then there's the art from that period of time. And that art connects you to the human experience. This notion of we can make art accessible in an unexpected place, and at the same time, whatever your day is as you walk by here, you can take a moment to reflect on the art. Maybe you like it, maybe you hate it, maybe you find yourself in a different way, because 250,000 people pass here every 2 days, and that kind of audience is tremendous. And then with Twitter and hashtags and everything has gone viral. And so I felt like, oh my God, all I wanted was to make art accessible. And I have this hashtag, looking is learning. You're not only learning about what you're looking at, but you're learning about yourself. You can do that through art. And yet we're a country that doesn't do enough culturally with the fine arts. And so this became just an amazing labor of love.
What kind of conversations do you want people to have when they look at the art here?
I want people to, and I love sitting here taking pictures of how people look at the art, looking at them, looking at the art. The conversations I want people to have is, I think so much that we do is outside of ourselves. We're on social media all day. I get it. it's so far out of ourselves, and we're also looking at how other people live. If art can bring us back to ourselves in some way and feed us in some way to get closer to who we are, the uniqueness of every individual, that's really remarkable. I think that that's what art does best. It brings us back. How you see something, how you see this piece is different than the way I see this piece. When you tell me how you see it, it's the closest I can ever get to seeing it differently and seeing it through your eyes. You are as a younger woman, right? From a different cultural background, from a different background. Then we get to share that experience in our observations. And I see that people do that as they stop here and they're looking and they start to talk to each other, not necessarily about what they're upset about or whatever political situation we're in at the moment or what somebody has texted, but what they're seeing and that exchange.
Right. And through the art, people can share their stories and their perspectives.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it is. It's what is your story? And if you could tell your story, if something in the art prompts you to see your story in a certain way or reflect on your own story, then we've succeeded. We've absolutely succeeded because it's bringing it back to you. It's bringing it back to the individual and also the artist's experience. And those two are happening. And I think that's what art is extremely powerful.
What do you want your artist to bring into the space? Like, what do you look for when you...
It's interesting because this space is really, in many ways, it's an installation, right? I can't really bring in a canvas. But I'm not necessarily looking for installation art. I'm looking for a new language. I'm looking for artists that are working in a new language, like who Bing did with the broken glass, or the way Cindy did with the helmets. But I'm also looking for people to be engaged, to be completely engaged with the work. So Garrett's work is a lot about these figures in nature, these figures in mythology, and then the crossroads of technology. So all of the wires, this neon god and stuff. So I like that concept. I like that concept of science, but also going back to mythology, going back to nature, but also going into this area of where are we with technology. And I think that's very interesting. I think it's also interesting for the space. And considering that Sprint is the host here, it's also, I think it ties in to that as well.
And how do you think the dialogue is unique to the Flatiron District, this being here in this space? So.
Well, I love it. I love what Madison Square Park has done with the art, right? They have a great curator, and they have wonderful, terrific art exhibits. And so you're in this space, which this big Flatiron space right here, we have no trees. We have the plaza out here, right? So you have a lot of people sitting at the plaza. You have the subway, which I'm sure you can hear. You have the buses. I mean, this is like the height of urban. And then you have this moment. And then if you walk across, you have the park, you have the greenery of the park. And then you have that moment of art in there. So it kind of jumps a little bit, but I do feel like it's this oasis in the midst of all of this hustle.
And I think that, this installation being at the point of this of the street, it can really be like a pause to your day.
Exactly.
You're like rushing somewhere, and then you notice this art, and then you can take a second for yourself.
I love that you said that, because that's exactly what I want people to do. I want them to pause in their day, and I don't want them to pause. And I'm mindful. I'm not preaching, because I do this myself. I don't want to pause and look at something on Instagram, and that's what we're all doing, or Snapchat. I want to pause and look at something that has some kind of, that will be meaningful in some way. And I want to be clear that I would never blame people who are not looking at art. Art has been elitist for too long. The art world is where it is. It's a nightmare of their own making. It's been too elitist for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell this to students. I say to my students, my diverse students all the time, because I'm always working with kids in museums and things. If we go to a museum, or let's just say we take a selfie,
Mm-hmm.
right? What's the first thing you're going to look at when I show you the selfie? And everybody always says, myself. I'm going to look for myself. That's right. Now, if you go to a museum, Hannah, and you don't see yourself represented, are you going to go back to that museum? No. So if we're living in a world where there is no diversity on the curatorial level, there is no diversity at the board of director level, if there is no diversity and people are not being reflected in the collections, or they're not being reflected in the galleries, people don't want to be a part of it. If we're only speaking in art speak, to where if you didn't get a master's degree in art history, you are not following the conversation. Nobody wants to be in your conversation but your select few.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that people don't want to be a part of culture. We have not made culture accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's wrong. And so that's what I have been trying to do here is to make it accessible, to speak everyone's language.
Final thoughts or comments?
I mean, I always hope, it's New York real estate,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm extremely mindful that this is very valuable real estate, and we are here on borrowed time, and whatever we can do in the meantime, I'm excited to do, and I'm excited about this next phase, however long it lasts. But I look at it, I've been saying since 2011 I'll only be here for another month.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited about this next phase because it's really going to open up the dialogue
Mm-hmm.
of diversity,
Sure.
inclusion, art, and living art